Once again, after World War II, the US, along with the IMF and the World Bank, two institutions in which the US is the only country with veto power, by the way, went to work opening countries up to American money. Coups and territorial/military expansion weren't enough. Through policies like the Marshall Plan in Europe and conditional loans in the Global South demanding countries reduce their government spending and sell off their assets to American corporations, the US fashioned a global order in which American capital, much like the American military, could freely move in and out of most countries. While people are mostly stuck within their borders, American capitalists can now freely buy up assets or set up factories wherever they please. Meaning, wherever workers are the cheapest, labor laws are the weakest, and natural resources are the least well defended. All of that without needing to set up any official colonial government, just signing a couple free trade treaties and letting American money do the talking. This unprecedented access to the resources and wealth of other countries means that, by 2012, American companies owned 46% of all publicly listed shares of the top 500 corporations in the world. For a country representing about 4% of the world's population, this gives American CEOs unrivaled power and control over the wealth produced globally. And this is only compounded by the fact that since 1971, the US replaced the global gold standard with the American dollar. See, to participate in the global economy today, you pretty much need US dollars, particularly if what you're trying to buy is oil, which pretty much every country wants and is priced against the dollar. While countries can sometimes trade in their own currencies with some reciprocity, it often isn't possible to supply all your needs without using dollars. And this means that most countries' central banks are forced to add dollars to their international reserves if they want to have access to the outside world. Many countries are now, therefore, deeply embedded in American monetary policy, whether they want to be or not, allowing the US's ability to create new money or tweak interest rates to dictate massive chunks of the global economy in its favor with a single keystroke. And if all this wasn't enough, the final way the US flexes its economic power is through sanctions. Here again, nobody is on the US's level. Today, 1/3 of all nations and around 60% of all poor countries now face some form of US sanctions. In total, the US has some 15,000 active sanctions, 3 times as many as the next country and breaking all historical records. This, and the fact that so much trade happens in dollars, means that denying access to the dollar, like many sanctions do, can completely cripple countries. Not just their economies, like we often hear it reported on the news. Sanctions, while often seeming much less dramatic than war, can be just as, if not more brutal for average people's livelihoods. The 60-year embargo on Cuba, for example, has meant that any company or country that wishes to trade with Cuba risks facing sanctions of their own. Faced with the choice between the massive market of the US and the tiny island of Cuba, most companies make the sensible decision. The consequence of almost everybody cutting Cuba off this way puts millions of lives at risk. And that's on purpose. In the US government's own words, the sanctions are there to, quote, decrease monetary and real wages, to bring about hunger and desperation in the hopes that enough suffering will mean a coup against the Communist Party of Cuba. You already know that it hasn't worked. It's just meant people die without access to food, water, or medicine that is plentiful just outside the country's borders.